قائمة. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. My dear respected brothers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, O you who believe, fear Allah as He should be feared and do not die except in the state of submission. I would like to look at the understanding of the ayah in Surah Al-Hud, verse 78, specifically the end of it. And in the light of what's happening in today's world, worldwide, with a disclaimer that we are trying to keep the dialogue open of what is truth and what is not, and what is real and what is not, what is night and what is day, what is the sun and what is the moon. I don't know, it seems like we are even starting to doubt that these days. So that's a disclaimer. If someone disagrees with you, does not necessarily mean that it is hate speech. And this is by the parameters of reason and rationale as to how a person feels about you in their hearts. That is something you cannot change. They also are, to an extent, have the right to that. You might not like me, I might not like you. That's how humanity has been moving forward for centuries. People have different opinions and understandings of each other. Isn't that what the world has been pushing up to pretty much not too long ago? Especially with the concept of freedom of speech. It was something that they championed around the world, that every human being is allowed to speak their mind. And there is a law that protects that. And it was supposed to be at the foundation of certain societies and certain systems, to be able to find out the truth so that the people may rule, the law of the people. Of course, the Muslims and others were somehow always ostracized as we are not respecting that. Okay, so let us today understand just that with the disclaimer. There's no hate here. There's nothing. It is an academic understanding of a concept, which is, can the dialogue of right and wrong still be open in the world, or has it been closed? Our people are out to say, if I differ with someone, express an opinion or not, and in the light of everything. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Al-Hud, at the end of the verse of Ayah 78. And it is Lut alayhi salam. And he's asking a question. And he says, Alaysa minkum rajulun rashid? He said, is there not one wise man amongst you? And he's addressing a specific community of people, i.e. at that time, the people who were approaching men to get their desires other than women. So Lut alayhi salam is telling the people, these are my daughters, females, and you guys are males. Straightforward, right? Why don't you marry them? Do you have shahawat and desires? Nothing wrong with that. Does Allah say it's not allowed? No. See, there's a place for everything. So here are my daughters, marry them. These are women. Do you approach men other than women for your desires? And their response and their objections were along the lines of, kick them out with him. إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. These are people who like to be clean and pure. Right? It's like, it's bad to be clean and pure. Now, I'm not going to go into the cleanliness and purity of that part, because I think that's somehow, to an extent, understood, isn't it? But I think what's the intellectual discussion and question has to be put forth, as Lut alayhi salam asked. He said, أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. Because it's something so obvious, isn't it? That man, woman, baby. And humanity has been moving that way for millenniums. It's quite simple, yeah? Like night, day, sun, moon. Now people say, oh, what? This is wrong. It's hate speech. But why? Why? Okay, and at the same time, can we not state the obvious? They say, no, gender is a social construct. That is the argument. So a very famous comedian recently, he's a Muslim. May Allah guide him, you know. He has a lot to improve on, inshallah, but he is a Muslim. In his own words, he says, but I'm not good at it, right? But has caused some controversy that has gone all over for some statements and jokes that he has made. That's not my issue. The jokes, the language, the whole thing is haram. And we totally are clear about that. But what I want you to understand is not just that, not because of this, but it's this whole concept of gender being a social construct. It is not obvious. DNA there's nothing. This is something that we as human beings have constructed, as in, you are a male and you're a female. Why? Because there's a specific set of tools, and going even deeper, DNA that assigns that or says that. But they say no. Because there are some people who are now saying, but I don't feel like a man, I feel like a woman, hence I should be okay to be a woman. But of course that causes a lot of problems, does it not? And I think slowly the law is realizing that, such as recently the so-called mixed washrooms, where a so-called guy who identifies as a girl went in, he identified as a girl, Allah knows best if just for that time, but he raped inside. So then the lawmaker said, okay, maybe do we need to revisit this or what? Why do we even have to get to that point? Why does it? And that's where the verse is, أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. Do you not understand what's going on? Like, is it not obvious enough that this is going too far now? This is going too far, right? It was supposed to be supposedly freedom of expression and thought. So these people express themselves. But now it's not good enough that they express themselves and somehow the world accepted it. But now you have to kind of bend towards whatever they say. Because if not, then they are hurt. And if you are hurt, it is hate speech, and how dare you? And that's kind of like the worst thing that you can do now. You could technically be, I mean, even racism is not at that level anymore in the world. You can be a different color, which is kind of interesting, right? I mean, is race a social construct as well? Can we say that? Right? Can one of us brothers say, well, I identify as a blue-eyed white man, you know? I want those privileges, which we know what we're talking about. It's quite obvious. You look at the brother, he's like, well, you're not really that. Or you look at me and you're like, you're not that. Doesn't matter what you identify, right? Could we say now, well, I identify as a different culture, so I need the passport. Be nice, huh? Isn't it? Can say I identify as Australian. Give me that passport, baby. Because that's how I feel. Because in the end, that's what it is. I don't have any evidence to prove what I'm saying, but I feel like that. So do I have anything to do with Australia? Nope. Nope. I don't even know if I've ever seen a kangaroo in my life properly. Maybe I think one time when I went to Australia. But anyway, that doesn't make the point. I don't really have anything to claim from Australia. No evidence. right? Same with a brother who's African. He comes and says, well, I identify as a blue-eyed Norwegian or Swedish. And the people are like, excuse me, sir, that doesn't really make sense, right? So how come if a man goes and says, I identify as a woman, people are saying, yes, sir. I mean, ma'am, sorry. Why? أليس منكم رجل رشيد? Is there really no person who has some intellect? This is not to like say people are this or that. It's an intellectual question that Lut alayhi salam is asking his people. What are you doing? It makes no sense. Because you're supposed to put the right thing in the right place, but you're putting it in the wrong place. But look at the whole concept of freedom of expression and hate speech. Why didn't so-called heterosexuals get upset when these people talk that way? Because that would be quite insulting, isn't it? You're saying, I should say hate speech. And never anyone pushed this whole agenda of homosexuality. And again, this is for discussion, right? Then heterosexuals should be, oh, hate speech. Hate speech, this is hate, this is against heterosexuals, we don't find this, right? But no. Because what happened is actually, we just stood there and allowed for this to happen. Because people are scared, including the Muslim community. The Muslim community kind of just backed off, and because of fear, to even entertain within the concept of freedom of speech at that time, which was quite popular and being pushed a lot, most of the Muslim communities just kind of silently accepted. And now you have a time where your own children are coming and saying, I'm confused. I don't know if I'm a girl or a boy. But you look like a boy. You definitely have the tools of a boy. Everything is like a boy, but you don't feel like one. Right? Same thing. There are now people, transgender, transracial, people are saying, imagine, this is no joke. People are saying a 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70-year-old man can say, I identify as a 5-year-old boy. Now imagine what that's being used for. It's a problem. It's a problem, isn't it? Because when you remove the limitations and things don't make sense anymore, there's no concept of evidence and reality and truth, then anything can happen, isn't it? And there is no limit. And hence society can really lose grasp of itself. And that's exactly indeed what's happening right now. Because people are not, how do you legislate that now? Is it only for this group of people? Why not for this group of people? Why this group of people is allowed to invoke hate speech and why not this? And where is it going to end? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created human beings with aql, with mind, with analysis, evidence. Bring your proof if you are truthful. You look at things, you analyze, and you say, well, that doesn't really look like that, does it? It's really hard for me to accept that, but I gotta accept it because you're gonna cry if not. And if you cry loud enough, there's going to be a lot more people who are going to cry with you. So we should back off because we don't like too much noise. And that's the problem, I think. I think we're in a time where every form of conflict is considered as hate. I cannot oppose you if I see you doing something that really doesn't make sense. I'm not talking about like, okay, I should respect like a brother's coming from a different culture and different food. And I'm like, man, I hate your food. Why? This is his food. This is his culture. This is what he was raised with. Just because we're now meeting in one common country doesn't mean I have to restrict his food or his culture or some of his practices. Because, hey, there's just a difference in how we were raised. But when it comes to something universal, observable, clear-cut, come on. أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ? Is there not a wise person who can really use their intellect amongst you? And you can see the agenda keeps moving and moving. And people are being affected. And this is a plea to the world at large that this has to stop through intellectual dialogue, through opposition intellectually, where people say enough of this, because we're going to lose ourselves. We're going to be in a position where we can't control anything. Everyone is going to be able to claim that they feel like something else. Everyone is going to be able to claim, if they commit a crime, for example, that they identify as something different, right? You have now contact sports. You have now certain athletics where men are allowed to compete in female categories, including weightlifting. Okay, including weightlifting. I believe it was the New Zealand team that had a weightlifter in that category. And it is really not fair, is it? It is not fair to humanity. It's not fair to truth and falsehood, if we even care about those things, if they still matter to us or not. And I think this is my point today is, can we just limit and just you keep quiet, because I feel hurt if you're going to defer with me. Can I defer with you? Can I, on obvious things, if you tell me you have a beard, I mean, it would be very difficult for us, all of us, to believe the brother if he says he feels like a woman. When you look at him, right? Or the brother, you're like, wait a second. You basically have to give up your intellect. You have to give up every observation, everything that Allah has given you, right? And just say, no, I can't allow that, because you might get offended. What about me being offended by what you are saying? Why doesn't it go two ways? Why this double standard? I would like the world to consider that and not just label it as hate speech. Even me saying this, for example, if I were to upload this video, and I will, there's a chance of being pulled down and getting flagged, because someone will consider it as hate speech, or they will not be happy with it, right? But you see, we need to do something about this. Not because we hate. What we feel is up to us. We also have, I mean, wait a second, it's a bit of a double standard, right? So I can't control the way you feel if you feel like a woman, but you should control the way I feel if I don't like that. Do you see that, right? You cannot control if I hate it or like it or don't like it or whatever. That's just my feeling. The way I choose to express it and talk about it, that maybe I can control. That maybe we can agree about, right? Should I like, maybe that we need to be careful, obviously in the spirit of wisdom and understanding with what's going on today. But I think my purpose is for people to really focus and extract from this ayah, this beautiful, meaning. أَلَيْسَ مِنْكُمْ رَجُلٌ رَشِيدٌ. So not one person, one person who could at least understand what's going on, because that's a problem. If we reach that state, then there is a problem. And there is definitely a double standard, and it's not fair. And I am insulted and sad about it. You have offended me. Okay, I feel sad. So I would like to also claim hate speech. I feel like I'm being hated on everywhere I go. I cannot express how I feel about being a young, white, heterosexual Muslim man. I feel hated on because I cannot choose what my children learn, for example, in school, where they're pushing this agenda as young as 5 years old with books such as I Have Two Dads and this and that, and all kinds of subliminal messages and very open messages, including in cartoons, including in Sesame Street, which so many children grew up on. Okay, that now you have these kind of things happening. Is this really fair? Because if it's supposed to be an issue that everyone should just kind of grasp, why target children in their developmental stages where they don't really understand these things? It's about conditioning. It's very clear. If you want to target me or you, well, we kind of understand. We can choose whether this is something we agree with or disagree, right? So bring it. But why target him? who's watching cartoons and he's not cognitively analyzing it the way you and I would. That's not fair. I would say that's playing indeed unfair. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us to the right path and help us to understand. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أما بعد, I think the humanity is in a very deep crisis. Post-COVID, I was reading some statistics that more than half of the world has some mental health issues. The lockdown, not being able to change environment, social distancing, lack of interactions have caused a lot of people to suffer from mental health issues. Anxiety all the way till depression. And I believe that now more than ever, we need to reassess and reaffirm what is truth and what is not. I believe now more than ever, where our freedoms are being leveraged against us to accept certain things, we're in a tight position, but also the right time maybe to come forward and say, look, the doors for dialogue have to be open. Just because I disagree with you on something doesn't mean I necessarily hate you. And if I do hate you, that's inside of me. Maybe we can agree that we're not going to hurt each other physically or this is something, and of course there's a law and a reality. Okay, no one is going to deny that. It is what it is. It reached to this point. But the Muslim community, if any, is the last stronghold. Because as you can see, other communities have kind of let it go. And the Muslim community and the Muslim countries are kind of the last stronghold on this subject of gender constructs, what is homosexuality, what is heterosexuality, and so on. And especially protecting our children. Okay? And I will mention this because recently there was a choir that came out with a song. It was out of San Francisco. And the theme was, we're coming to get you, we're coming to get your children. And interesting enough, me as a father, and you as a father and a mother, if someone says that, and amongst them are some very shady figures, which have a history with the law, okay, and they've been identified. If someone is singing publicly, getting millions of views, about 50 people, saying that we're coming to convert you, we're coming to get you, we're coming to get your children. You can imagine as a father, people will not be very, very happy, right? It is insulting. It is hate speech. Because I'm telling you and you and you that we're coming to get your children. As a father, I'll be like, no, you're not. Of course you're not. I'll do everything I stand for to make sure you're not touching my children. Don't I have that right if you are threatening me that you're coming to get my children? That I should protect them, because I don't agree with the way you see life, right? However, look at the double standards again. They were able to, whatever reaction came from the community, of course Christians in that area, was right away converted into hate speech. They became now the victims, even though they said, we're coming to get you. Imagine if I say, I'm going to come and get you, brother. And then you start training and it gets some proper, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling threatened by you, come on, what is that? أليس منكم رجل رشيد? Is there not a man of wisdom amongst you who can see the reality, who can see the double standard, who can see that these things don't work, that it's not fair? I think this is the time, brothers and sisters, all over the world, Muslim, non-Muslim, for people to say enough. It is enough. We are allowed to speak. Maybe not the way the brother did with some proper jokes where he really targeted, but in the end, one thing that I'll take from this guy, again, disclaimer, I'm not necessarily defending him or agreeing with him, but one thing I'll take from him, in the end, He said, I don't care. I'm not going to change my stance, okay? Because it doesn't make sense. You've been crying your whole life about freedom of speech and expression. He said, that's exactly what I'm doing. Why are you upset? And you're doing your own, I'm doing my own. You're also upsetting me. If I upset you, what's the problem? Because if that's the standard of so-called freedom of expression, then why are you upset? Why are you upset? This is what we're built on. That's what the nation has been built on. As for the Muslims, we know the people who are allowed to speak are only the qualified people. That's something that we know. Even with our problems and our issues, in the end, we have some agreement that those people who talk in Islam anyway are people who are indeed Ahlul Rushd, the people of understanding, isn't it? Even in our basic Mustalah al-Hadith, who is the person who's really allowed to say Qala Allah, Qala Rasul? Who is the person who's allowed to talk about politics? Who is the person who's allowed to talk about this and that? Everyone needs to have some qualification. Not every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or Ahmed, Muhammad, and Abdullah can speak on every matter. This is agreed upon in the deen. We don't claim that everyone can just say whatever they want. This is what we are built on. But they did. They did, and they contradict themselves. And I think that's important for us as a community to learn so we don't reach that level, so we protect the little ones and the future generation, that, of course, they don't give up or capitalize or leave their basic intellect. That this is sun, this is moon, this is boy, this is girl, this is night, this is day, and that's it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to understand. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to reach to the people and help us wake up, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send peace and blessings on the best creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has brought us these simple concepts of guidance. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallam taslima kathira. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallayta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamid Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر لي والمسلمين والمسلمات المؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك السميع الكريم مجيب الدعوات. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين وتوب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وأقيموا الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون.